I still believe in an 85 to 15% rule in terms of if you want a good output, you got to put at least 85% of your work into it, or it's just going to be plain vanilla GPT.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
I'm your host, Anna Melikian. I'm here to support you, increase your impact while preventing burnout. The Mindset Zone is a place to pause, increase your self-awareness, and embrace the experimentation mindset. Find more resources, including information about the Mindset Zone book and audiobook at mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. Today we are joined by Nick Potkalitsky, an AI literacy consultant, instructor, and researcher. He is the founder and CEO of Pragmatic AI Solutions and author of AI in Education, a roadmap for teacher-led transformation. He's also the author of the Substack Educating AI, where he focuses on exploring the intersection of education and artificial intelligence. Welcome to the Mindset Zone, Nick.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on as a guest.
I love your background in education. You are still a teacher. We were speaking before the call that your students call you Dr. P, correct?
Yes, yes, they do. It's the shortcut.
I'm really thrilled to our conversation today because when ChatGPT was open to the public back in 2022, many schools initially they had that knee-jerk reaction to ban. You cannot use ChatGPT. Just don't use it. And I remember at the time was when I was seeing all this showing up and all that was transforming the way that in the workforce, I was, oh my gosh, schools cannot have a so black and white kind of view around this. So can you share with us your own experience working within the school system and what lessons have you learned since then?
I initially became aware of GPT through a student who had like a glimmer in his eye when he brought it to me, and he showed me how it could create an essay just with a single sentence prompt. And he wanted to get my reaction. And this certainly caused a little concern being a writing teacher. And then I went through the process of my own research, and I saw a lot of my colleagues trying to squash it out. The districts I worked in never did an all-out ban, but they were considering bringing in software to detect AI at like the district level. But the school that I'm working for now, I led the charge over the summer to do a lot of research. And this was the summer of 2023, and ended up writing like a big paper that I published out through the AI supremacy Substack on Michael Spencer, who's a big AI guru, and he's been pretty generous to put out a lot of my work on his much wider publishing network. And so folks can go there to check out those initial reports that I published. And we discovered over that summer that these AI detectors weren't all that reliable. Using AI to detect AI is going to get you maybe like a 90% reliability. And when I came back and was talking to my administrators, we went with more of a trust our students, get to know their voices, and assign more writing in class kind of philosophy. And that's what I've been doing since then, is pivoting away from like a high stakes essay where it's the first time you really see the essay is at the end of the process. We're chunking things up a lot more, so there's no big surprises at the end, where this is like the first time you see your students writing or first time you're getting to know their voice. It's much more of a process pedagogy kind of way of doing things as opposed to a product pedagogy. And it's working. It's, of course, there are going to be students who are still trying to cut corners, but we're trying to just incentivize the doing the hard work as opposed to always running to the tools to get ahead. But it's a work in progress.
So, and I love that there is a ton of things here to unpack because I'm curious because your background, what you do a lot is being writing teacher. You teach kids
Yeah.
how to write better. And then come one of your students with ChatGPT and, oh, we have a very cool thing here to show you. And with one prompt, with one phrase, you can get an essay.
Right.
And then, oh, what are we going to do here? And I love the emphasis on the process versus the product, because that it goes very much in line with the growth mindset.
Right.
That is so much, if we reward just, okay, you are an A student or you are the product of something, instead the process of something.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's so many like vital skills that students learn when they're writing. And I come from the school of thought that I come from is it's called generative learning theory. And the idea is that students make sense of content by doing things with it. And we in the past we've done things like summarizing, mapping, imagining, self-testing, teaching others, enacting or role playing. These are ways of giving students like a second pass through content and amplifying their agency, amplifying their engagement so that that knowledge can really like sink deep, go past working memory and get into that deep space where it's more experiential. And writing is one of those amazing technologies that we've been doing for thousands of years that has allowed us to take stuff that's on the surface and really like cook and stew in it and allow ourselves to level up and create new ideas. Just because we have this new technology that can produce text doesn't mean we want to just give up on this like thousands of year old idea generation tool. So that said, we also don't want to turn our backs on the new technology too, because I think it can be a good augmentation tool.
And I love what you said there very much. It's like music to my ears. Writing is that technology. Because I think nowadays, and I speak a lot about this when I'm speaking with business owners and other associations and organizations of professionals, that usually use the word technology. We are thinking about the gadget like our computer, like a phone, a smartphone. But really, technology, if we go to the origin of the word technology in Greek, has to do with using a certain knowledge to achieve a practical result. And from that, the more broad perspective, and even bring anthropology to the equation here, the emergence of the writing systems, I think 5,000 years ago, was the culmination of a lot of technological advancements. Because there was, what do you say, the papyrus didn't came out from came out from a process of doing things in a certain way to get a certain result. The ink that was needed to writing the papyrus is also the result of technological advancements. Even writing on stone, it's not easy to write on stone. So or in the clay with the cuneiform of all those things, there were technological advancements that allow the development of writing, and that create this separation that we still use today of prehistory and history, thanks to writing text. Yeah. And then we could go on to, will be philosophy possible without writing? And so many other of the advances of that afterwards came through with science and so forth. if we didn't have this thing that we have developed, that is the writing systems.
Right. Yeah. And we're in a place now where students, they don't yet have the mental modeling where they can fully take advantage of this new augmentative technology. Like when they sit down and they work with an AI model, they're still applying essentially word processing mental models when they're like grappling with how to write and edit. But when they're like going and they're working with an AI tool that now has a certain measure of agency, there's like this there's like this open space, and I think they almost like then default to, okay, let's just take the text as authoritative, and it's like such a flow of good content because their critical evaluative skills are maybe not necessarily up to par to push back that they're not taking full advantage of what AI can really offer. And this is where the next wave of education is essentially going to be happening. And like the curriculum that my team and I are like building out now is like, what are those mental models that students need to explicitly grapple with a machine that, like, my concept is like there's an inquisitive process and a generative process happening simultaneously. So you can be asking it questions and you're just getting feedback on the one side, but you can also be asking it to generate content, and then you're taking that content and putting it into a document. All that's coming out of the same portal. And I think we're going to get better tools down the line that are going to help us like track the outputs better. But right now it's all coming out of the same portal, and students are they're just always playing catch up. And so that's where the work of teachers comes in,
Yeah.
is how can we break down that process so that if they can become more reflective about the different steps that the machine is taking.
And is the students that are catching up and the teachers that are catching up to
Right.
both, and society that is catching up and culture that is catching up. And it's fascinating because, like you are saying, we need a new frame of reference and new framework to deal with this, because one of the things I read, a book that probably you are familiar with, that is Co-Intelligence,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
living and working with AI, Ethan Mollick, I think it's like that you pronounce
Hmm.
his last name. And it's really fascinating because he's proposing this. Okay, this is not another piece of software like we were used to, that like we were used to software that is very mechanical oriented. So 2 + 2 = 4. And now we have these new technologies that ChatGPT is probably the better known of them, that is this other way of interacting, and 2 + 2 for chat can be much more creative. Yes, can be 4, but can be 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 could be
Hmm.
something totally different, because it's the way is more. I think we have to learn to interact with it in a different way that we are used to interact with other pieces of software, because it has other capabilities.
Right. Yeah. And it's much more conversational, is what one of Malick's theses. And we actually, in my upper level English class, we read that book over the summer as a framing text. I was very much impressed with it. And the students have been using it throughout to pull out hallmarks, touchstones, particularly some of the ethical questions that he delves into. And I think that's another hallmark of AI literacy programs moving forward, is inviting students into that critical AI work of not just how to use tools, but what is like the larger significance of using these tools. Because like my favorite chapter in that book is about like the preciousness of expertise, like what happens to expertise in light of the rise of these new systems. And he has the surprising idea that we're actually going to need to memorize more facts, and there's going to be an increased value on mastering things that these AI systems can do very well, because there's going to be a need for this kind of like watchful, a human in the loop,
Yes.
um, as these systems increasingly grow more and more powerful. And that's me as a writing teacher. That's really positive for me to hear, because one way you can imagine out the future of writing instruction is 10 years from now, students are simply going to be sitting in front of GPTs and are going to be like orchestrating writing through the GPT. And I think, like, that's what causes a lot of people fear and sadness and like resentment. And I think what Malik and myself were imagining is like there's still going to be this need for highly creative human writers, because even as advanced as I am in terms of AI writing, which I've certainly gotten quite good at it, but the AI is really only as good as what you're putting into it. And I still believe in an 85 to 15% rule in terms of, if you want a good output, you got to put at least 85% of your work into it, or it's just going to be plain vanilla GPT, particularly if you're working on like a conclusion. Like if you want to have a good conclusion and you're working with AI as a thought partner, if you haven't given it sufficient good stuff, it's never going to take that extra step that you really always want to see in a good conclusion.
I love that. And because this is a tool or a technology that is going to change the way we live. I truly believe that. And depending how we use it, it can be a good thing or not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even in education, you're speaking about the writing process. And I'm thinking about another book that I read from the founder of Khan Academy, where he speaks
Mm-hmm.
about Kumigo, the development that they did to create this tutor using the Socratic method that helps the students to really go in the material and creates the possibility of anybody with a computer and internet connection to have a personalized tutor to help them learn. And that is, whoa, the power of that is amazing. And you were speaking about the writing process and interaction with AI. Honestly, I love, and I have to have the time to do it, but when I have the time to sit with my AI tools, I love Claude from Anthropic for longer content. But we can do this with ChatGPT too. The thing about act as my English professor that also is very good in writing plays or writing things that are, so we can give it the role that we want them to play, act as, and then okay, I want to tell this personal story or this episode that happened to me by this. Help me write a more engaging text. What kind of things do I have? So we can use it when I have the time. And I think a lot of the thing is the time to go back and forward in that conversation. The pieces that I have done that way, the end result is much more impactful than me alone, that I'm not a writer, but I can write better about my own stories with the help of AI.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on something that's really important. So, and this is happening within the teacher ed tech industry right now. One way that the industry is trying to get tools into schools is by promising that the tools are going to help teachers be more efficient and generate their materials much more quickly, save time so that they can focus on other things. And I think there's like a kernel of truth to that. But what I'm seeing in like my own use is that I'm still spending the same amount of time on my material building or when I'm doing writing with AI, I'm still spending the same amount of time, but it's just improving
The
the
outcome.
quality. And these tools aren't necessarily about efficiency. It's about opening up spaces for metacognition. And on my next book projects are going to be focusing on AI as like a prompt for what I'm calling like generative thinking, because I think if we set up the right sort of situation for students, and it has to be really heavily scaffolded. It's not just about putting a student in front of an AI tool, but if you set it up in the right way, students can really start to think about their own thinking, can really have opportunities to rework through content and have a deeper, more agentive experience with particular lessons, particular units. So I think like Sal Khan is like started the beginning of the revolution. Like Conmigo is like a good step. And like we're starting to see like Google has Learn LM. It's another like Socratic
Yes.
tool. But I think all of these tools are just it's too tool based. Like the best tool in any classroom is going to be the teacher. And the teacher, if you highly train the teacher and if you give power to the student over their learning process, and you have those two variables in play, then you're really getting somewhere. And that generative AI as that third part, then you have this triangle of power where, like what I'm saying, like generative thinking becomes possible. And I'm just really excited, where this can go, but it's got to be set up in the right way, and people really need to be trained in order to do it. Because I know our teachers out there have a lot on their plates, and this is going to be a long-term commitment and investment on the parts of schools who, for one, just have to get the tools in the schools and get the teachers trained, and we're still in the middle of a sea change moment where there's a lot of justifiable concern and questions about the place of these tools having not really yielded the short-term benefits that a lot of people out there are promising or even celebrating. So
Yeah. I have the saying, use AI to do better
mhm,
rather than just more. And out
good.
there is a lot of the temptation, more 10x the productivity. And absolutely, we can do things, some of the things faster, but then what are we going to do with the time? In school systems and in the workplace, even in the teacher's plate, if you just to add more things for the teacher to do, that is not a good thing. That is, in my opinion,
Yeah.
only going to create more burnout, but is also an opportunity to create that space and that time to have that more critical thinking that is so important. I love what you're saying about the teacher, the student, and the AI to create that collaboration that
Hmm.
can allow us to enhance what we consider humanity, because it's not humanity versus technology. Technology was
Right.
always a part of humanity, and we have to understand that our cultural system has to evolve with it.
Right. Yeah. And it takes time. It's going to be the sort of the stories that we tell that are going to allow us to make meaning about these new technologies. So my PhD was in narrative studies and rhetoric, and that's something that I came to deeply appreciate is these stories that we tell about technology. Technology is like the great disruptor or the great amplifier. These almost have the same equal power to the technologies themselves. And we're at a cultural moment where there are tons of stories being thrown at AI. And I recently just wrote a post at Educating AI thinking about how people are now talking about AI in terms of is it on the level of the internet in terms of its disruption, or they flip it on the head, or are we at to the point where like we've come to just accept it as normal like the internet, because those narratives can go both ways. And I think that process of telling those stories is really how we make sense of the world and how we help our students make sense of these new technologies. And that's just a part of this beautiful, like, unfolding problematic that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. I will add, and yes, the cultural level, the systemic level, of course,
Right.
and also the stories that we tell ourselves. Because
Mm,
our mindsets in there, one of the ways of seeing mindsets is habits of mind that we develop during our
good.
life. And a lot of is the stories that we tell ourselves. And I think this can be an opportunity to rewrite some of those stories, to acknowledge some of them, and to tell some of the stories better too.
Yeah, I really like that. So I know how my stories about AI have changed over time, and sometimes they change even throughout the day, depending upon whether Claude is allowing me to actually use the full form versus the concise form, which Claude has been getting pretty stingy these days. I don't know if you've noticed that, but
Yes, it's the question of resources. And the other thing for me of fascinating of increasing my AI literacy and understanding more, because my PhD is psychology. You have
Mhm.
you're in English, correct? Your PhD.
Right.
Mine
Yeah.
is in psychology, so what called humanities. That is interesting for me when looking and learning more about the technological side of this, how amazing the human brain is. Because
Hmm.
with much less energy, our brain was evolved to spend as less energy as possible and we accomplish quite amazing things.
Yeah.
And anything of AI spends an extraordinary amount of energy. That is one of the reasons and resources why Claude of Anthropic is limiting a little bit the outputs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation. And students definitely like to talk about the environmental impact of these tools. And I think that's a a reason why we also want to cultivate caution in terms of I painted out those two versions of writing and instruction in the future, one where students are fully infused, and that's a wasteful kind of version of the future where we've very much just outsourced all of our writing activity to these tools, which are draining energy and water at very high rates. So if only for the good of our planet, we can hold on to these writing skills. That I think that's a pretty good reason. But so that's a much bigger question. So
And the process of self-discovery and self-development that
exactly.
goes together with writing.
Yes. Yes. So
So we could go on forever years,
yeah.
and we have a limit of the time. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
I have website for my company at pragmaticaisolutions.com. And my company, we set up teacher trainings. We also do individual consultants, consultations, but we help schools upskill or also just develop curriculum plans or evaluate tools. I also have developed some online courses at pragmaticai.sutra.co, and all that's available on the website. And check out my book with my co-author, Mike Kentz, who's another brilliant AI literacy guy, on Amazon. That's AI in Education, a roadmap for teacher-led transformation. And you can also send me an email at nicholas@pragmaticaisolutions.net. And the Substack, Educating AI, you can subscribe and get weekly updates. So
Love it. And I will make sure that I will put all the links on the show notes of this episode.
that'd be great.
Thank you so much. Because I think now is the time of having these conversations and making sure that we are using these technological advancements to the betterment of humanity and not the other way around.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we're at a tipping point right now.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Expanding possibilities. The Mindset Zone.
If you can think of a person who will find this episode helpful, please share it. Spreading the word about the Mindset Zone podcast is very powerful. For extra resources, including information about the book and audiobook, Mindset Zone, Actualize Your Human Potential, go to mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. As always, I'm so grateful that you are here. Expand what's possible for you, for the ones around you, for the world.